it became evident in late '94 that Ernie was going to survive, and that eventually he was going to be able to come back and drive a race car. Now, in his mind, it was going to be for Daytona 500 1995. I mean, I remember being at the Waldorf Astoria at the banquet week at the end of '94, and we were in a suite, and it was Robert, myself, and Ernie and Kim Irvin, and it was somebody from Ford, somebody from Texaco, and we were trying to make sure Ernie was involved in our plan. We didn't want to just pick up the phone and say, Ernie, here's who we've got to drive the 28 car. We wanted him to be a part of this process. And he looked at us, and Kim was supporting him. It's my car. I'm running Daytona. That's not what we think's going to happen, Ernie. We're being told that that's not going to happen. We've got to come up with a one-year plan, and that we already have started having conversations. If you can come back on into the season, that we will figure out how to field a second car, but you're not going to run the Daytona 500. And it was some pretty spirited, heated conversations. Because I got a contract, and it says I'm the driver of Robert Yates Racing, which I applaud to some degree.
Yeah.
It just showed his passion. But a funny story. So we come up with a plan with Dale Jarrett. I'm not sure Ernie was on board with that, but he wasn't going to be on board with anybody just because. We could have got Mario Andretti, and he was going to say Mario can't drive a race car. So, but that's okay. You understand that. But by January, Ernie was actually doing pretty good, and we were down there testing at Daytona. And you know how the old garages used to be, and you could kind of spread out in there and not be right on top of each other, because all that was there was Fords. And we were kind of in that one back garage there, kind of in the back. And I can't believe we schemed this plan. Pulled our team van in the garage area to kind of block the rest of the garage area. Dale Jarrett made a run, pulled in, got out of the car, and went up in the van. Ernie Irvin came out of the van in a driver's uniform and a helmet and got in the car and ran about 5 laps at the test at the beginning of '95 at Daytona. We were probably not very smart doing that. He had not really been released, but he wanted to do it, and you know what? We wanted to let him do it. And I never will. When I finally saw that thing coming off the racetrack, it felt like the weight of the world, because I'm telling you, if you'd have thumped me, I'd have probably split in half while he was out there making these laps, even though he was just by himself.
Holy cow, man.
Oh, yeah.
That could have been big.
Oh, yeah. So we go into '95, and we're not running very good. We did go to Daytona and sit on the pole for the 500. We ended up finishing 5th, but it's the damn hardest I've ever fought, I think, for a 5th place finish in all my life. We just were not running good. And I learned a life lesson in those first 8 or 10 races. The problem was myself and Dale. I was being hard-headed. One, I was missing Ernie Irvin, and I was being hard-headed and basically looking at Dale, not verbatim, but for a choice of words. Look, we won races, sat on poles, and led laps. You got to figure out how to drive this thing. Dale Jarrett, kind of being the meek and humble individual that he is, these guys won races and led laps and sat on poles. I need to figure out how to drive it. We were on a highway to nowhere. And honestly, I was about ready to tell Robert, find somebody else. Not talking about Dale, talking about myself.
Right.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it. And it took all the way to the Coke 600 weekend before we finally got on track. And what it took, we were struggling our guts out. And Robert was trying to help, but I don't think he knew how to really help. You know, Robert wasn't one of those owners that got in there and you need to do this and you need to do this, and that just wasn't Robert. And Robert says, you want to get somebody to run a few laps in the car? And I said, absolutely. He said, let me go down there and get Hut Strickland to come down here and run it a few laps. So Hut came down there, and I told Dale, I said, Dale, before he gets in it, why don't you kind of tell him what you've been feeling? You know, it wasn't like Dale and I were at each other. We just wasn't communicating about the race car like we needed to be communicating. And so Hut got in there, and he didn't run no faster than Dale, which if he had that might have been even a bigger problem.
Yeah.
But he came in, and he says, man, this. Okay, let's go to work on it. We worked on it. So it was a wake-up call for me, because all I was looking for is somebody to be adamant about what the car's doing and let's go to work on it. And Dale needed to see somebody that was adamant about telling us about the race car. And it fixed us. We go to Pocono, 2 or 3 weeks later, win the race up there. It's the only race we won, but we were competitive the rest of the year. And then, of course, the neatest thing is finally Ernie gets to come back, and we get to run Wilkesboro, Phoenix, and Atlanta with him. But Dale took that deal knowing it was just a one race deal. But there was a lot of other layers to it. Dale was wanting to do his own cup team. And he knew this was a good bridge to be able to do this. He had his own Xfinity Series team. So
Maybe open the door with Ford, maybe?
Ford,
Yeah.
Yates engines,
Okay,
a lot of
yeah,
things.
okay.
There was a lot of layers that, you know, yeah, he took a gamble and left Joe Gibbs and came to Yates knowing it was a one-year deal and one-year deal only, especially once we knew Ernie was coming back. But Ford was just wearing Robert out about starting a second team. You know, they wanted to really go up against the Hendrick multi-car teams, the other teams that were doing, back then 2 cars was a lot of cars. So, but Robert, I'm not doing a second team. His philosophy, when they make Victory Lane big enough to pull 2 cars in, I'll think about doing 2 teams. But economically, it made just really good sense. And, you know, Robert and I had a lot of lengthy conversations. I don't know that I was high on him starting a second team, but I knew the support that we could get, that it would only elevate both race teams. So he made the decision to do it. Dale Jarrett was never on the radar to drive it. Never even in a conversation. You know, Dale basically had a letter of intent from Hooters. He's starting his.
Did he?
He's starting his own team. So we're at Michigan in August. Ironically, Michigan in August, and we had led the race and led it, and had an engine failure, 30, 40 laps to go. And Robert and I are in the rental car by ourselves, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. We're pulling out of the infield. Robert's driving. I'm in the passenger seat, and we're just about to go through the tunnel in turn 1. I said, Robert, we're not very freaking smart. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're running all over the place like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to find a driver for the second car. You're looking everywhere under the sun. We've got the driver we need right here under our nose. And he went, Jarrett? I went, no question. There is no question. I said, I realize you're probably surprised hearing that from me, considering what we went through the first third of this year.
Yeah.
That man can drive a race car. And there was other things, you know, that was getting a little bit iffy on his starting his own deal. A man with 3 young kids and a Hooters sponsorship with what Hooters was going to ask of him, it's doesn't perfectly line up. So I think there was some apprehension on he and Kelly's part about this whole Hooters sponsorship deal. So I think by the time we got to Bristol, a week or 2 after Michigan, Dale was signed to drive the 88 car.